before we begin and jump into today's topic, I'd like to kind of give a brief intro to each of our guest speakers. The first of which is Jared Goldman of New Balance. He is their Senior Director of Design. And over his tenure there, he has established the creative direction and brand ethos for New Balance. And in less than 5 years under his direction, he was able to more than double the gross revenue for New Balance. So he knows a thing or two about driving revenue, but he also knows a thing or two about driving sustainability efforts. He pioneered their 3D design process for footwear prototype production and helped execute on New Balance's sustainability efforts. So really driving what it means to become a more sustainable company. So thanks for coming on today, Jared.
Hey, Cam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. All right. And also with us today is Ellery Connell of Foundry. Go Foundry. He is our technical and creative solutions lead, again, here at Foundry. He is a 20-plus year veteran of 3D modeling. He's a teacher, speaker, and author where he literally wrote the book on 3D design, which, again, can be found at Amazon, so please check that out. But while he's not doing all of that, he trains Foundry's clients in both moto and colorway and helping them to get up to speed and proficient in not only making 3D models, but how to also rapidly iterate and really making 3D assets so photorealistic you'd swear you'd be able to slip them on. So, Ellery, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Great.
Okay, so why are we talking about sustainability, right? It's a big buzzword in the industry. A lot of your leading brands will have pages on their website devoted to their sustainability efforts, press releases, whatever else. For some, it is just a byword, a buzzword in the industry, and for others, it is their life's passion. It's what they do. So let's dive into a little bit why we're talking about sustainability, and then we'll move over to talking to Jared about some of their real-world examples there at New Balance. So NASA reports that the Earth's average temperature has risen about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit or about 1 degree Celsius since the late 1800s. And basically what that means is since the Industrial Revolution really kicked into high gear, the Earth's atmosphere or average temperature has been rising. And the world scientific community, by and large, has agreed that this is due in large part to increased carbon dioxide equivalent emissions and other, human-made emissions that are being pumped into the atmosphere every year. So, what does that mean? Why is that of concern to us? Well, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration here in the U.S., as well as their sister agencies across the globe, have concluded that by the end of this century, Earth's average sea levels, because of this rise in temperature, the sea levels will rise on average 1 to 8 feet, again, by the end of this century. Now, that's if the temperature reaches a plus 2 degrees Celsius gain from the late 1800s, which we are well on track to do. The caveat to that is really, and this is no pun intended, the 2 degrees Celsius mark is kind of the high water mark for that. Really at the 1.5 degrees centigrade, that's when a lot of island or coastal regions will start to see a lot of localized devastation. A lot of their cities could start to go underwater if mitigation efforts aren't done. So really, it's the 1.5 degrees Celsius that we are really worried about. And so that's if things go unabated by the end of this century, we will see mass human displacement from, again, island and coastal regions, severe weather conditions like hurricanes and major droughts, All this could cause major food insecurities across major regions of the earth, regional ecosystem devastation, and massive human migration. Most would say that we're already in the midst of this. NASA has put on record that from 2010 to 2019, it's the hottest decade on record since we've been recording the Earth's average temperature, say over the last 150 years. That's big, and not only within that time frame is it the hottest decade, but there was I think like 3 or 4 years where each year was the hottest year on record until the next year when that became the hottest year on record, until the next year when that became the hottest year on record. So things are starting to intensify. Most would agree that we are in the midst of a climate crisis where we're seeing a lot of these like super hurricanes that are starting to emerge on the east coast of the United States, as an example, or human migration that is caused, at least in part, to this instability that's caused with food insecurity and other things. So we're kind of in the midst of it. And most of the industries across the earth have asked the question, well, what are we doing to contribute to, number one, to this crisis, and what are we going to do to contribute to the solution? And the footwear industry is no exception. We have, as an industry, have looked and said, well, it looks like about 1.5% of the total greenhouse emissions that are being pumped into the atmosphere each year, the footwear industry is responsible for that. Within the design cycle alone, about 88.5 billion pounds of greenhouse gases are being pumped into the Earth's atmosphere. That's about 400 kilograms. And that's a lot. I mean, and that's just in the design cycle alone. So that's certainly something for us to kind of sit up and take notice. Like, gosh, that's a lot. And it might seem like that's a really big number and something that we can't really put our arms around until you kind of reduce it down to, kind of the basic element of a pair of shoes. What does that look like? Well, a pair of shoes pumps about 30 pounds or about 13.5 kilograms into, pumps greenhouse gases into the air every time one of those are produced. At its most elemental form, that's 15 pounds or about 6 kilograms of CO2 equivalent gases that are being pumped in to the atmosphere every time a shoe is created. And whereas that feels small, it's actually a great place to start, right? Because if you can eliminate one physical sample, say in the design cycle, that you are in essence taking 15 pounds of greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. And so that kind of leads to that good news. It's a small place to start, but if you think about over the life cycle of a product or a line of products, that really begins to add up fast, right? Because it's not just one physical sample that's being created. It's thousands, sometimes, over the course of a life cycle of a product or a line, it's, sometimes millions. So if you're able to start to take those physical samples and convert them into virtual samples, you are tangibly starting to have an effect on how quick or how slow we get to that 2 degree and 2 degrees Celsius. And hopefully, if we have, as an industry, moved to a much more sustainable model, we don't ever get there. So that's kind of where that's the backdrop to today's conversation. And now I'd like to kind of turn it over to kind of the pitch and catch session today here with Jared. So first of all, again, thanks for coming on, Jared. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to talk about it.
Yeah. So let me start with kind of a two-prong question that will kind of kick things off. So first, at a high level, what are the sustainability goals that New Balance has set for itself? And then kind of the follow-up to that, has 3D modeling and 2.5D design iteration help achieve those goals?
Yeah, sure. So 3D modeling for sure has helped our sustainability goals. It was not our objective when we started with 3D, but it's definitely something, it's a byproduct of it.
Hmm.
Just in talking about our sustainability goals, we have two that I think we focus on. So one is to achieve zero waste to our landfills in our footwear factories by 2025. So
Wow.
that's a pretty aggressive goal. And the second one is part of this the UN Fashion Charter, which is a 30% reduction in CO2 emissions from operations supply chain by 2030. So those are two key goals that we focus on as a company. Two areas I think that we can really make a difference as a footwear brand. If you think about it, 75% of our carbon footprint comes from materials. So if we can use less materials, we can reduce that. And about 15% of it comes from transportation. So shipping materials to different factories, shipping our product around the world. So those are two big things. And then we have something that we're calling Greenleaf that we started with our apparel. And it's where we're using 50% of more of environmentally preferred materials. So we have that going with apparel now, and that's something that we're launching in 2022 for footwear as well.
Nice.
That was coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I really like that zero waste. That's pretty cool, and that's pretty aggressive too.
Yeah, it's not easy to be done, but you have to put something out there and have a target.
Right. Is that something where you think that you're obviously having to work in concert with a lot of your product creation centers, I would imagine, to kind of figure that out. Are they?
I think we partner with our factories, we partner with material suppliers, and then this whole digital really plays into it because if you think about how many samples we make, how many sales samples that we make and ship, a lot of that goes to waste. So the more we can create digitally, the less waste there will be. And then I think just using digital tools to be smart in your design so that you have less waste, you're able to do that as well.
Okay. So yeah, that kind of, I guess the second part of my question is, so you're kind of leveraging 3D tools to really advance those sustainability goals. And I know that's something that you're like actively working towards right now. Can you like give us a little sneak peek into, like how are you using 3D modeling? It looks like maybe you're having a little bit of bandwidth issues there. Can you still hear me, Jared?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So how are you using 3D modeling to kind of help achieve some of those goals?
Yeah, like I said, I think 3D modeling, the sustainability part is like the byproduct of it. But a couple of things that, we're using 3D modeling as a tool for decision making. We're trying to, go more to the digital product sampling than the physical product sampling. So the more we can do that, again, the two big things that are driving are samples, right? Material usage and shipping, right? So if we can make less samples and use a digital tool to make a decision off of, we don't have to ship things around. We don't have to make extra samples. So that's really where we see it from a sustainability standpoint, from a digital side.
Gotcha. That kind of leads me to my next question. Why did New Balance initially start its journey to digital product creation? And how long ago was that?
So I was thinking back, we started in 2014. So we've been at it for quite a bit of time now. And I think probably one of the leaders to get involved with this. But, when we started, it was really about 2D designers going to 3D. It just seemed like the natural evolution. All the designers were sketching on a Wacom tablet, using Sketchbook Pro and Illustrator, and drawing orthographically. And it just seemed like, hey, we need to start to design in 3D. And we had tried other programs, Rhino, SolidWorks. They were really engineering based and just they didn't work for us. And then I saw a demo of Modo at a seminar, and then we contacted you guys and started working together. And it's definitely more user friendly. I wouldn't, there's challenges for sure of making that transition to 3D, but yeah, it seemed like the right tool, and we saw the output from it, that it made a lot of sense for us.
That's interesting. How long did it take you to get kind of an initial, up and running, digital transformation starting point? How long did that initial one take?
It took a while, right?
Yeah.
Because we didn't know what we were doing, right? And we were really relying on Foundry to come in and help us to, set up a pipeline and that sort of thing. When you really look at footwear, it's a pretty complicated product. It's not a hard good. It's not a soft good. It has imperfections. So it's really difficult to make something look real. And, the one thing that I've learned with 3D is it's either 100% accurate or somebody's going to call it out and say that's a fake. It's not like looking at Illustrator where it's fake and nobody questions if your drawing isn't in proportion. With 3D, it has to be dead on. So it takes time. I think it probably took us a year of just playing with things and that sort of thing to get something that we felt was really good. And we've been really about the standards and quality, proportion, material. Material is a huge thing. How do you build your digital material library? We've been working with Swatchbook right now to build our digital library to be able to get real world materials onto 3D projects. So it takes time. One of the big things was when we started, I thought it was a designer tool. Like all my designers would shift into Modo and everybody would be looking at everything in 3D. That's happened to some extent, certainly not across the board. But I think what we realized pretty quickly was that we had to have production artists. So we went out and we hired an expert in the field to be our leader around 3D and pipelines. And then we built a US team, and subsequently we built an Asia team based on our factory to be able to sample. So we're trying to sample almost 1-to-1 for every physical sample we make. We're trying to make a digital match.
What would you say would be what was the biggest challenge then of that? Was it the software as a barrier to the designers, or was it somewhere else that lied in the biggest challenge in that?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think from a design standpoint, people were just apprehensive to add a new tool. A lot of designers are just used to working in 2D and trying to make that transition to 3D. It's challenging. I've tried it. I've had success and probably more failure, but I probably haven't put in the time that it's needed. But it's challenging, and I think the people who are tech savvy and into it, they make it work, and it's great. The other side is from our product marketing team. They were skeptical that they could make decisions off of a digital sample. And it took us a long time. We really had to work on consistency and making a really high quality model. Again, if it wasn't 100% accurate, somebody would call us out and say, that's not what the shoe is going to look like. And they said, I have to have a physical sample. So we really focused on being 1-to-1. Proportion is key. Getting that like relaxed look and feel of a shoe is really hard to do. If I was going to do it again, like I was going to start now versus 6 years ago, couple things from my standpoint. You have to hire an expert, right? If you don't have somebody who knows what they're doing, because I know I've been in footwear for 20 plus years. I know how to make shoes, design, get everybody going. You need somebody who knows Modo, 3D pipeline, and all of that part of it. You have to get alignment from your organization, because it takes change. It takes pushing people to do something different than they're normally doing. And you have to have, budget and resources, right? For computers and render farms and software and people. So those are a couple key things that you need to think about as you're getting into this.
I've kind of seen there's this reasoning sandwich where you have to have the financial and the business goals have to give you enough impetus on the top end to push down, and then you have to have the designers having to have a tool that's good enough and accessible enough that they want to use it because they're benefiting on it, and then you actually get change. But if you leave out either one of those, it gets really difficult. Where would you see you guys going next? What do you think would be the next kind of goals in that realm for digital transformation?
I think we're continuing pushing the digital versus physical, and right now we're like 1-to-1 matching things, and I think as we go, we're going to see, and I think the last 5 months have been a perfect example how people have had to make decisions without having a physical sample in their hands because it couldn't get it to them, and we were lucky enough to have these digital tools to be able to do that. So I think we'll continue pushing forward with that. And looking for areas that we can do that in a bigger way. The one thing you need to remember is, we're making something that goes on a human body, right? We need to fit test, we need to wear test, we need to see how the materials come together. So it's really important still to make a sample. But the question is, if I'm making 10 colors, do I need to make all 10, or can I make one and then make 9 digital colors? So there's lots of ways we can go. We're hoping we can work closer to market as well. Instead of doing 3 rounds of a prototype, do a 1 round of a digital prototype, get everybody to sign off, and go right into production. So those are things that we can certainly be doing in the future.
Nice. So you've been doing this, in one fashion or another since 2014, and like you had mentioned, now in this post-COVID world, all huddling around a table and looking at physical samples, that's not easily done these days. So to piggyback on that, what are some of the benefits that you've seen from increasingly design in both a 2.5D and 3D environment? What are some of the main benefits for you?
Yeah, I think from a design perspective, just better design work overall by utilizing 3D tools. Instead of like looking at flat orthographic views, you can rotate a product. You can really see what that toe down looks like. A designer is working more 360, so that's helpful. I'd say better decision making earlier in the process. As a designer, I'm designing something, or my team is, and they know what it's going to look like when it is in a real sample. But the developer or the product marketing or somebody else that you're working with, just maybe they can't see that. They don't have that ability. If you're showing it in 3D, there's no question that's what it's going to look like. So those are huge. The other thing is just the tool of sharing concepts. So the level of the decks that we put together to share product with our merchandising teams around the globe, with our sales team, is at a different level because we have all these digital tools. We do fly through animations, all sorts of things that really enhance the product in that process.
That's cool. And I mean, as you guys are, no pun intended, but marching towards that zero landfill waste, I would imagine that just being a digital native now by this point, it feels like a sustainable or like a reachable goal.
Yeah, whether it's reasonable or not, we're driving towards it, and the digital workflow will help us get there. Again, it's not the main focus of digital, but it's certainly helping drive us towards those. So yeah, it's definitely something that we constantly think about, and I think as a design team, we probably think about it more than the average person in the company. And we've done different initiatives. We did a shoe called a test run that reused. We had leftover material in the factory, and one of our designers was on a trip in Asia and designed a shoe using all this extra webbing and pieces. And we sold. It was a small run, but the product was all super unique, and it was again just using recycled material to do that.
That's cool. That's cool because otherwise that material would have just gone to waste anyhow, right?
Right.
Huh.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, and there's other things that we're doing with digital that are really consumer driven. So we do something with what we call a maker site. So we're able to put a digital sample up on a maker site and show colors or styles to consumers, and then get direct feedback on what they think is the strongest. And then we're going to go and make those colors or styles, versus, in the past, we work on an 18-month calendar. We're trying to think and estimate what people are going to want, and we make a whole variation. So some of these consumer-driven insight allows us to be a little bit more focused with product, and that's using digital assets to do all of that.
That's cool. Well, and I have to say, if there's one happy knock-on benefit to doing virtual samples and whatnot, just for the audience's sake, Jared shared with me, in this post-COVID world, we're all working from home, and he gets to take a quick lap around the pool, for his lunch break. I mean, man, going virtual, if for that alone, so you don't have to go into the office to look at physical samples, you get that happy benefit. So,
well, I think if anybody who has kids has heard the word hybrid model, we need a hybrid model, because we certainly need to be in the office. There's just some things you need to do with people, and looking at models and looking at materials and that sort of thing. But there's a lot we can accomplish digitally as well. And I think, the work that we've done in the last 6 years to put ourselves in this position really has allowed us to move forward. We did a digital sell-in for this last season as a brand, right? We couldn't go meet with accounts, and everything we presented was digital assets. And because of the work that we did over the last few years, it allowed us to be ready for that. We didn't know it was coming, but we were ready. We had these assets ready to go, and they were super high quality. And I know you're going to show some of them, but the team that we have is amazing. I mean, photo reel down to every little detail on the shoe. They do an amazing job with the product.
Yeah, that's cool. And actually, that's a perfect segue, because we do have a quick demonstration that Ellery has prepared. So I think at this point, we'll be posting our next poll. That'll be going live soon. But before we switch over, I just wanted to say that our first poll, it looks like TV movies would be people feel most competent in if they had to enter the world championship of trivia, with cats
close
coming in second. So, I feel like we're all kind of prepared though for cat trivia with all of the cat memes that are across the internet and Facebook and whatnot. So, I kind of feel like that's a little bit of a gimme. Kind of surprised that more people don't feel confident about dogs, but not sure what that says. Maybe we need more dog memes across the internet. But keep that coming. I'd love to see which wins out. I'm a little bit surprised that sports is trailing behind cats. Just it feels a little bit.
I'm not going to be able to help you with cats.
Right.
Sports, I might be able to.
Yeah, I was going to say, and if you look in Jared's background, I sense that he would probably do very well in sports. And for the company he works with. Yeah. Great. Okay, and it looks like the second poll has been launched. So, Ellery, I'll give it over to you, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A.
All righty, cool. So while I'm getting my screen up here, and I got to make sure that I'm sharing my whole screen, not just my application, so that when I switch windows, you can still see what I'm doing. Let's see, that should be it. Yeah, so we've got some assets that Jared and the team were kind enough to send over for us to kick around and use a bit. So I'm going to show a little bit of some of the stuff that they shared with us, as well as just some other things, so we can see things in kind of different categories. But this is a good example of what you can get out of a digital asset, not just in terms of being able to visualize something well, but being able to really, really rapidly iterate on things like color and materials. And so let's see. And actually here, I'm going to temporarily disable my webcam just to just to kind of speed my own internet connection and allow my screen to come out as clear as possible. But I'm just going to give kind of for anybody who hasn't seen Colorway, I'm going to give this isn't even going to be the nickel tour. This is going to be like the 3 cent tour. But then if anybody has more interest, obviously we can always follow up later. But Colorway is designed to be an application that is very familiar to anybody who has used two-dimensional tools. Jared was speaking to the fact that they had or still have designers that are using things like Illustrator, Photoshop, Sketchbook Pro, 2D applications that have a really simple and easy to use interface. And we'll look at Modo here in a little bit towards the end, and you can see that there is a different level of complexity when you get into 3D. But the nice thing is that working in an application like Colorway, you get a lot of the benefits of 3D visualization without a lot of the heavy lift as far as learning curve. Typical to a lot of 2D applications, you have info and palettes and stuff about what is in your particular document on the left and the right-hand side, including tools, color palettes, things like that. And in the middle, you have your canvases. Let's go with canvases. You have your canvas where you can have individual sheets and things that give you an insight into the work that you're designing. Like I said, that's the 3 cent tour. I'm not even going into the 5 cent tour. But let's actually look at what we've got going on here. So in this case, there's a shoe, and we've got 4 different views of this shoe. We've got kind of a lateral toe view. That's our main view. We've got another one coming medial from the heel, and we've got a toe down and a view of the tooling. So you can get a good view of kind of all parts of the shoes. But if you have other views, you can always throw those in and add those into the mix without having to go back and do additional work. Now, Colorway is a really interesting application in that it works. We kind of throw it out. It seems like buzzwordy, so I'll explain it as we go. We say 2.5D. And the reason that this is 2.5D is because these images are rendered. They're essentially fixed, and they're coming from the perspective that you see them on the canvas right now. And directly inside of Colorway, I can't change that. I can't rotate these around or twirl them or anything like that. But what I can do is I can work with these different views, and they all understand where they live in 3D space. So they still have links back to their roots as an actual 3D model, which this 3D model is going to live and exist in Modo. So because of that, it means that anytime I go and make changes or adjustments to one part of a shoe, whether that's something simple like changing a color. So let's grab the eye stay here, and I'm going to make some really bad color decisions. I'm going to warn in advance. So Jared, I'm sorry. And any color designers, I apologize in advance, but it's what I do. I make bad color decisions, and then color artists feel happy for knowing that I'm not going to steal their job. So if we want to change the eye stay here to bright neon-y yellow, we can do that. You can see that it's changed not only in the one that I selected here, but it's also changing up in the heel view and in the toe down view, because all of those parts are linked and connected. And we can take that even one step farther by adding on graphics or textures or anything like that. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a folder that just has a bunch of images. There we go. And I'm going to go grab, let's grab something fairly simple. I think I've got some, there we go. I've got some checkerboards there. So let's go ahead and select some checkerboards and put that on there. You can see that now sits on top of my yellow eye stay. Now I told you I'm going to make some bad color decisions here. So warning again in advance, I've got to reiterate it because it'll get worse, I'm sure. But now I've got that in there. And the great thing about that is if you're working with a pattern or a texture or a graphic in an application like Photoshop or Illustrator, you're typically placing that graphic inside of 2D space and just, clipping mask, cutting it out so that it fits into, in this case, the area of the eye stay, right? But that becomes problematic when you want to see, well, what's that going to look like from the toe down? What's that going to look like from a different perspective? Because you're looking at something just from a single perspective. But because items in Colorway really exist still in some ways in 3 dimensions, it means that I can move and adjust this around. As I pull this back, it'll have a little bit of lag because I'm also streaming at the same time. But as I move this around, you can see that it's also updating on the other views simultaneously. Now, if I want to make that smaller, I can scale that down, and you can see again, I'll mouse up and give it a second. You can see I'm scaling down that pattern on all the different versions. And that means that it's much easier for me to go in and place different parts, different graphics, different textures, and just see where things are going to lie without having to worry about, what's that going to look like from the toe down? What's that going to look like from the other side of the shoe? And all of those things are going to happen organically because of the way that Colorway is set up and built. Now the nice thing is that there are really kind of two prongs of the design attack that Colorway has, and one is the visual one. And you can take and make color choices, material choices, really, really quickly. You can see here I have a list of materials. I could have this linked into a PLM system or something like that, and then anything that I have loaded in digitally, I could take and apply to any part of my shoe. And the other part of that is where data lives, and the way that data hooks into Colorway and your pipeline in general. So in this case, I'm just dealing with basic colors and some graphics and things like that. I'm not hooked into a PLM system here, but I am hooked into the data that exists on those. So I know this text is going to get pretty small, so I'll zoom in here to a portion of this spreadsheet. And I know this is every designer's favorite part of working on a new design, and that's updating a spreadsheet that tells you information about that design. And the nice thing is Colorway is going to do this kind of work automatically for you. So you can see here I have a number of different parts, and those are listed in here. And as I mouse over those, you can see that those cells will highlight. And if I zoom out, we'll actually see that as I highlight across those cells, you can see that version of the shoe there, that those particular parts are highlighting. So again, this is live data, and it links in the way that that Colorway is not just working with the design that I have currently, but the way that it links into my overall ecosystem. So if I'm hooked into a PLM here, if I have materials loaded in, I can see a lot of additional information that's going on here. So that means that if I switch to a different version of this shoe, so let's go down to the green one here, you can see that everything in this spreadsheet has updated. But that doesn't mean that just colors have updated. If I, again, I'm linked into a PLM on this, and I change the heel from a patent leather to a suede, I'll actually be able to see the information flow in through here in this spreadsheet. So that means any information that exists in my PLM, that could be country of origin for the supplier, that could be the relative cost, that could be a lot of other things that normally would be not so visible to a designer or in a line review. And all of that information is there at your fingertips when you need it. When you don't need it, it just sits out of your way. You could even take this sheet and get rid of it from the page, but as soon as you bring it back in, that data is still live. And so that becomes really, really powerful. I know one of the things that, Jared, you were talking about was, you're looking at supply chain and looking at things like that. Well, that means that here inside of Colorway, as a designer, you could look through and you could start making, as a material artist, you could make material choices, and in a glance here, see where your materials are being sourced from. So you might see that you have most of your materials coming from a particular region, but one of the materials on the shoe is coming from somewhere else. And you could actually see that here live as you're designing, and maybe that could lead you to make a choice that is going to more localize that one material that is outside of the realm. Again, fictitious scenario there, but you kind of get the idea. When you have more data at your fingertips, it allows you to make decisions in a different way, and hopefully in a better way. Now, the other thing is that all of the work here between the visual side and the data side is all updated live. And that means that anytime I make changes, I make adjustments, everything is going to go along for the ride. So as a designer, really it gets all of that stuff out of my way, and it allows me to do my work without having to worry about, did I keep track of that? Did I update that? Or is this a particular line that some of that data isn't important? Then it's out of my way. But if it becomes more important, or if it is more important to someone else in the workflow, in a line review, to a manager or something like that, you have all that data there. So if I go through here, and let's actually go through and make a few other tweaks here so that we can see kind of what we've got going on. I can make updates, and I can make new versions of anything that I'm working on without having to really worry much about what's going on. So let's say I want to take this version of the shoe here, and I'm a sucker for kind of blacked out editions of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab all of the yellows that are in here, and I'm just gonna make those a pretty dark color here. And let's see, I'm gonna keep some different colors also available. So what I can do is, as I work, I can save different colors to a color palette, right? So I'm going to do this here. So I'm actually going to go get a couple of different shades of gray here, and I'm just going to add those in. You can see them added into my working palette here. And so let's put in a few different ones, and maybe we'll put in something just barely off-white, so we have a little bit more variety in our monochromatic landscape here. So let's go ahead and grab this part here, and I'm going to select everything that has that kind of orangey look. And just as a side note here, you can see as I select things, you can see that those cells in the spreadsheet are automatically highlighted. Oh, it's kind of cool. I like to geek out on this stuff. So let's go ahead and make those parts. Yeah, let's make those the gray color. Let's grab this bright yellow, and we'll replace that bright yellow with black. And actually, just to keep things interesting, let's grab the New Balance N, and we'll give that a pop of color there, just so that we keep things from being totally blacked out. Now, if I've gone through and made all these changes, and I like this, or I want to see what this looks like compared to the rest of my line, the other designs I've been coming up, I can just add that as an option that will pop in. I'll see it. It'll pop in here into my contact sheet, and everything goes. And then if I decide, you know what, I really do want everything blacked out, I'm going to black out the end. But I don't want to erase that version with the bright colored logo. So I'm going to add that in as another variation. Now I have those two to look at right next to each other. And since all of the graphics that Colorway uses refer back to their native components, they'll refer back to native resolution, which is great too. So it means if I want to zoom in to my contact sheet here, even though these are pretty small thumbnails, you see, in comparison to the rest of the sheet, I can zoom into these, and they're actually going to be at nice full resolution, and I can see where those are going really easily just by kind of looking back and forth at those. Oops, and it looks like I've done something to hang up my computer here. We'll give it a second to recover. This is the joys of live streaming, what you're doing. But as my computer is recovering, I was actually going to switch over to another asset here in a moment anyway. But you can see that the main idea here, oh, there we go, is that the idea of Colorway is to allow you to have better visualization, a better clue, a better visual aid as to what you're going to work on and what it's going to look like. And have that happen a little bit more organically too, without having to go through and work directly in a 3D application or do any of those things that typically are going to deter a designer that doesn't necessarily want to add new tools to their set. This is going to empower them to be able to have more visualization options without having to do a lot more work in order to get them onto their page. So let's see, let me zoom out here. So I like this, and let's we can kind of hop off of this. We do a lot of work with sneakers, but I also wanted to bring up another asset here. Let me see if I can find it, is always the question. There we go. So we can also work on things that are a little bit simpler. So this is a mock-up of a shoe by the noted high fashion brand Foundry. Not really, but hey, it's a fun one to work with here. And we can see that I've got a very simple layout here. Now this would be good for somebody who wants to work with really basic, more minimalistic approach, and really maybe you're just interested in the visuals at this point. And so Color will allow you to do that as well. You don't have to have all of the spreadsheets and tables and contact sheets. If you don't want those, they can stay out of your way. But the cool thing is they can be added at any time. But I can take and do iterations on something like this very quickly. So maybe I want to have a version of this one in this case where the footbed is more of a natural leather color. So I'm going to go ahead and make a version with a natural leather color. Or maybe I'd like to see that with an actual leather in there. So I can go over and I can load in a leather swatch that I have. And let's just go ahead and add on a layer here to that texture. And my computer's complaining at me because I have several instances of multiple design applications set up for the demo. When you're working on your own desktop, usually you don't have to have 3 versions of the software running, so plus streaming. So things tend to hang up less when you're doing that. There we go. Wow. So let's go in here, and I've got some leather. So I've got 2 different leathers here. I'm just going to grab those and drop them in. And now what I can do is I can see what that's going to look like with a natural leather. if the grain of that is a little large, I can also check and adjust the grain, or I could see that what that looks like with a softer grained leather. And I can, just as quickly as I made iterations with color, I can make different iterations with those different versions of leather. And then I have those right here at my fingertips to click through, and I can look at those and very easily make decisions. Now, one of the cool things about this also is that a lot of the work that you do and you update, it means that that you don't have to be keeping track of this as much as you would in like a normal workflow. If you're working with multiple sketches or multiple iterations of a design in Illustrator, you don't have to keep those in multiple files, or you don't have to keep a bunch of groups of layers or things like that. All of that exists over here, where you can just keep different variations. And as you go along creating different variations and things like this, you can also go through, you can always rename those. So if I wanted to call this leather one, I can call that one leather. We can call this one alternate leather. And you can go through and you can make notes on the work that you're doing, so that, you know, as you are working on these things, you've got all of your notes and your things there live updated. So that's kind of the nutshell look at colorway. And you can see that the basic idea here is that the main focus is to get better visualizations, to get better views and better understanding of how a design is going to work. If we go and pop this bright yellow color on here, it's one thing to know what color I'm picking out of a Pantone palette or off of a color swatch library or something like that. But it's another thing to understand how that color is actually going to look in the real world. And that's one thing that working in colorway is going to give you. And of course, I just realized that I didn't colorize the logo on the other side. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I've got to update that just for completeness sake. And you can see what that's going to look like without having to wonder, when I put that on there, if I put that on a rubber versus I put that on a suede versus I put that on a fabric mesh, how's that going to look? This will give you those visual cues and let you have a good understanding, so that when you actually get the real sample, you know what you're going to get. And it makes it really, really powerful. So with that, I want to be conscious of time here. So I'm going to go over and let's hop over and take just a really, really quick look inside of Modo, and we can see what goes on in there. And I'll apologize in advance to Jared. I've got another brand sneaker up here. Sorry about that. This is just one that I had built recently. So I'm going to use this one to look at the difference here between Modo and colorway. Now, one thing to note here, and this is kind of an important fact, is that I'm not going to give even the 3-cent tour of Modo, because there's a lot more in here. Just if I wave my mouse around, anywhere you look underneath my mouse, there's a tab or a drop down or another menu or things like that. Now that is a two-pronged thing though. One, yes, it is more complex. There is more depth to it. There is more learning curve to it. As Jared was talking about, he said they found out kind of early on that they didn't want to just try to force the 3D tools onto every designer and make them adopt something that is very different, but to have a specialized team was really, really beneficial in their case. The nice thing is that anything that you're going to want to do 3D wise, the tools are here in Modo. So you can use Modo to build and light and render versions of your shoes. Yeah, absolutely. But you can also use Modo to do pretty much anything else that you would want in this realm. Modo is used outside of footwear and apparel industries for product visualizations. It's used for game design, used for visual effects, modeling, all sorts of things like that. So all of those tools that were there for those other industries are still here for you inside of Modo. So they're there ready and waiting for you when you're ready to use them. So if you'd like to start off with something simple like just viewing your good realistic versions of your shoes, if you'd like to see them in different lighting categories, I have here a number of different lighting scenarios that I can just drop on here that'll let me see how my shoes are going to look in. This is different interior environments, retail environments, things like that. I could also go and look and see what those are going to look like outside. So do I want to see what these are going to look like in the daylight, in the sunshine, at night? I can see what these are going to look like, and it gives me more insight into what my customers are going to see once the design is completed. And the nice thing about this is, as I was saying, there are so many tools in here that you don't have to learn right up front, but you have them there waiting for you to leverage and create more power. A good example of that is that for a lot of the work that we've been doing internally at Foundry, my team has been working hard to try to develop faster ways to create and iterate 3D designs of shoes. We want to take down the creation time that it takes typically to be able to build models like this. And to that end, a lot of the tools that we've developed have actually leveraged from some of our animation tool set, things that you would typically see, to create characters and animate things like that. We've taken those tools to be able to build workflows that would allow you to rapidly build footwear. And so because that tool set is there, it just allows you to have all that stuff to leverage and to work with later on. And because of that, it means that you can do a lot of nice visualizations and be able to see how those designs are going to look. And oops, I opened that up on the wrong screen. So I just have a few other examples here so we can just kind of click through quickly and see without me waiting on them. So you can see the differences between different polishes of leather. You see here's a shinier, more hard polish versus a softer, thinner polish where you're seeing more of the texture of the leather. You can see different environments and different lighting and see how that's going to affect your designs. Or to even push that a step farther and use things for marketing or e-commerce or stuff like that. You can get into very, very fine details. Like in this example, you can see down to the individual weaves on the patch, and then of course I had to throw in a Moto one. So it means that the work that you do can follow you along, and you don't have to at any point stop and start from the beginning in order to create deeper 3D work. So you can start with real simple designs that help you visualize flow, that help you visualize how your model is actually going to look in real world space. But then you can also take that and add in more detail and get in as close as you'd like, so that at the end of the day, you can do a lot of additional work with your 3D models by just pulling that asset through from design in concept through finished render, through marketing, e-commerce, and all of those things. And that asset, that 3D model, will live along with it throughout that process. So that's the overall short tour of the stuff that we offer. And I'll kind of toss it back if there's any questions or anything like that, and we'll move on from there. Ken, anything you want to add?
You will actually, yeah. If you just want to keep that screen up just for
Sure.
a sec. So I think this is where the rubber meets the road, as far as like, how do you take physical samples out of your design process and replace them with virtual samples? Because I'm imagining, and Jared, please feel free to chime in, but if you're looking at that the bottom section there with those 8 samples, you would say, oh gosh, I think Douglas liked the Red Rider, so we like that one. And Ellery had some fun with that all black. We like that. I can imagine, Jared, you'd be able to quickly pare down on design to figure out which final physical samples you'd actually want to have shipped to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of what we do is just we call color ups. So we have an existing model. We know exactly what it looks like. We know how it fits. We're not worried about any of those details. So yeah, if you give sales, merchandising, whoever, this version versus a flat 2D Illustrator, there's no comparison, right? We're able to go onto an account and show them this and put in an order based on that, because we don't need to make a sample, wait 6 weeks, bring the sample back, and then ask them if they still want it. There's no questions here. It is, it's what you see is what you get.
Nice. Well, gosh, we are a chatty bunch. So we just have a few minutes left for Q&A, but I wanted to hop to those really quick. But by the way, Ellery, thank you so much for doing that demonstration. That's wonderful.
Stop sharing my screen while we're here. So.
Well, the first question that came in actually is for me. Ben just asked any insight onto where that 1.4% number comes from for the footwear industry. And let me go ahead and just put that in the chat pane. It comes from a number of sources, but one that is readily available here is this Qantas study, where I think they estimated that the apparel industry as a whole was like 8%, and of that 8%, footwear was responsible for essentially 1.5%. So there's that. If anyone wants to go, it is you have to fill out a little form to download the study, but it's pretty painless. Great. So the second question, and I don't know how much time we have for this, but I wanted to kind of push it out there because it is an interesting take on sustainability. John asked, okay, so a lot of sustainability efforts come around building or using more sustainable materials, but sustainable materials tend to be more expensive. Jared, do you feel like there's going to be a point where the consumer is going to push back and say, I don't want to spend that much? Or do you think that the average consumer kind of gets it? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think there's a little of both, right? There's some consumers that are out there looking for brands that are actively working in the sustainable space. Some brands you just know that they do this, and you buy their product because you know they're responsible there, and there are people that are willing to pay a little bit more for it. And then there's always people that, they want the cheapest thing they can get, and they don't care what it's made out of. I think as a brand, we always struggle with, obviously we have target margins and different things that we have to hit. And sometimes sustainable materials are more expensive. So how do you balance that? Make sure you're doing the right thing and being responsible, but you need to be doing the right thing and be responsible for your company as well. So we kind of balance the two, and there'll be initiatives where we'll push more than on others. And that was what I was talking about, that Greenleaf initiative that we have going on, started in apparel. We're going into it in footwear, and we have targeted models that we're working towards that sustainability goal.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's see here. This is kind of an interesting one. And this might be a question for both Jared and Ellery. Bruce asked about, do you use like 3D scanning to jumpstart the 3D design process? So say you've got like an existing product. Do you use a 3D scan to then put a skin in Modo?
We don't at all.
Okay.
We will use a 3D model from our tooling supplier. So the bottom unit of the shoe, where we're making a physical hard part, we'll import that. It's usually a Rhino file. We can import that into Modo, clean it up, and then that's usable. We typically don't scan a shoe because the geometry is just not clean enough. We'd have to resurface everything, and it doesn't work. There have been cases where you could scan a shoe in and use it as a reference model for shape. But I think our team has gotten good enough where they don't need that. They can kind of eyeball it one-to-one. So yeah, we don't really use a scan.
Okay.
I'd say on our end, we do a little bit of both, though it's for a scan, we do use it mostly, as you're saying, like as a reference. What we find that scans are useful for, like you said, the geometry is a mess. It's not really usable for most things, but what it does give is, the natural form. So we use it like as an alternate to create an alternate last. So if we want to create a last that has a little bit more of a lived in feel, that has a little bit of the crinkles, a little bit of the bends, we will use a scan typically for that, and we use it to kind of create a starter last that is the more out of the box last, as opposed to like an engineering kind of a last. So we use it in that way. We don't use it at all for anything that you're going to see as a finished model. Again, more of a reference. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. This one's for Jared. Have you seen any improvements in the production process that correlate with your advancements in digital prototyping?
Yeah, I think, if we're able to give the factory a reference model that's in 3D already, that there's always little questions on construction, right? What's going to layer on top of what? How are we going to seam that? So if we're able to show them, again, instead of giving them a 2D drawing, we're giving them, we call it a concept model. So before a physical shoe has actually been built, we can have a more of a conversation on how we're going to do something in construction. So it certainly helps. Again, it's, if I can see a picture of something, I don't have to explain to somebody else in a different language like what we're trying to do. They look at it and go, no, we can't do that. Or, and then you could have a good conversation. So it's definitely helpful.
Okay. So it helps better communicate design intent and help foster better communications.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. And this question actually will be for both of you, and I think we'll end there because I know we're going a little bit over time. How do you account for color differences on screen versus physical material? Okay.
You can. I mean, my screen looks different than your screen. I have 3 screens in front of me. They all look a little bit different. We all buy things on Amazon and online, and we don't know the exact specific color. It's one of those things that you just have to get used to. Our team all has color chips. So our designers, our factories, some of our sales teams has specific color chips. So if they know it's coral blue, they can look at a chip and know what it is. But from a consumer standpoint, you buy enough things off of a picture and you're making an educated guess on what that color is. But there's no way to control it from an iPhone to a screen. There's just too many variables there.
And I would add that color variability is important too, and having a color chip is a really good key thing in the design process, because then okay, what does this look like? But then the question always comes to me. I've been doing 3D for a long time. Having that swatch in my hand means that I know what it looks like under my lighting right here. But if I hand over to somebody else and they're in that lighting, then it's going to look different to them. So it makes it the question of, color is very, very perception and environment based. So as long as you have a sample that okay, I'm holding it right here and I've got this, true to what I see in my hand, from there, it's kind of one of those margin of error things, and it's going to look different to different people. So,
but even within Moto, right? You showed all those different lighting scenes.
Yeah.
A blue will look different in every one of those lighting scenes, and we had to do a lot of work to get the right lighting scene to get natural looking color, because we could have something that was really, like the image you showed that had a lot of like drama to it, but you can't see the real color. So there's that balance you have to find as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was I can't even remember where to reference this, but I was on another webinar just as a participant, and a fellow was talking about this very thing where one of the designers was just going crazy because everything their screen had turned this weird shade of yellow. And they called the IT guy to kind of try and help figure this out, because you don't want this yellow cast on your screen as you're designing a shoe. Well, come to find out, the designer had worn a yellow shirt that day, and it was casting on the screen. Onto the screen. I mean, so you're right. It is probably one of the most slippery fish to try and nail down. And I know some people actually use colorway. They'll actually have like a mock-up of an Instagram post, a mock-up of an Amazon e-commerce site, and just seeing how the shoe would interact just based on the other colors that will be on that screen. What is that going to look like? Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. I know we're going long. I really wanted to touch on some of those questions because I thought it would spark some great conversation, but we'll end it here. For everyone who has registered and attended, there will be a recap of this that will be posted, and someone from our team will make sure to get that out to everyone. So to our special guests, Jared and Ellery, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.